Hello, everyone, and thank you for your interest in the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant. This is a process overview of the grant. My name is Gabrielle Ugaldi. I am the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program Coordinator here at the Oregon Department of Agriculture. You can see my office line and cell phone here, as well as the Resilient Systems Grant email. Please reach out using any of these methods throughout your application process, and we will assist you to the best of our ability. So to start today, we're really going to hit four different items. We'll start off at what is RFSI? So what is the Resilient Food Systems Grant Infrastructure Grant? Next, we're going to look at the Oregon program, take a look at the timeline, and we'll end with what the application process is, including a look at how to apply and the applications themselves. So to start, what is RFSI? The Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant is made to build the middle of the supply chain resilience. It looks at strengthening local and regional food systems by enhancing capacity for aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, and distribution of local and regionally produced foods. Allowable crops within this program are specialty crops, dairy, grains for human consumption, aquaculture, and other food products. This grant does exclude meat and poultry. There are other grant options for those products. If you need more grant information about that, please reach out. Specialty crops are defined as fruits, nuts, vegetables, horticulture, and nursery crops. That also includes floriculture. The one key with the specialty crop definition is they must be edible. So there are a number of nursery crops that are not edible. For example, the boxwood tree, they're not in the middle of the supply chain. They would not be an eligible crop for this program. Eligible entities are producers, processors, or groups of producers and processors, nonprofits, local governments, tribal governments, and institutions. The key with all of these eligibility for entities is they must be operating in the middle of the supply chain. We can't have end of the supply chain or beginning of them. We really have to look at the folks that are operating in the middle. Some policies and requirements for this program is these federal dollars and all federal dollars fall under a document called the Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements. This is shortened to the 2 CFR 200, otherwise known as the Super Circular. As you're applying for the grant, you really don't need to worry about this document as a whole other than this document gives us as the Oregon Department of Agriculture our bounds of what we can expend money on with these federal dollars. Essentially, it tells us what is allowable and not allowable within any program. For example, if you wanted to take your entire crew out to the movies to see the new Marvel movie that's being shown, that would be an unallowable cost under the 2 CFR 200 Super Circular. However, purchasing a piece of equipment for the middle of the supply chain would be an allowable cost, and this document tells us that. Again, you don't need to worry about this. I've taken many classes on this. I know how to read it. We reach out to USDA if we have questions. So don't worry, other than know that you do fall under federal guidelines for the expenditure on the grant that you are requesting. Now, the RFSI has two really unique tracks within it. This is an interesting part of this grant. So, first and foremost, in the main track that this grant has is infrastructure. These are infrastructure projects, again, for the middle of the supply chain, ranging anywhere from $100,000 to $2 million. These are going to be a 3-year grant period, and there's matching requirement of 25% or 50%, depending on the type of individual that owns or the business identifies as. So we'll get to that in a minute. It can be a little bit confusing. I want to make sure that I explain that clearly. Again, the infrastructure grants must expand the capacity for the middle of the supply chain. One of the really cool and unique parts of this grant is that there is an equipment only simplified grant section, what we call track. These are equipment-only purchases from $10,000 to $100,000. They must be purchased within 1 year of the grant award, and there's no matching requirement. However, again, they must be in the middle of the supply chain. So we can buy things like tanks to process food, processing lines, food safety equipment. But on the equipment only side, it is literally just the equipment that you're purchasing. If you need to purchase the equipment, install the equipment, train all your staff on how to use the new equipment, upgrade your food safety items and cleaning items to better take care of the equipment, that automatically turns into an infrastructure grant. Now, you can apply for both grants. However, you can only be awarded one of the two grant for either application. Um, this does not exclude you if you are applying as part of an agricultural group. Um, for let's say for the infrastructure side, a group of agriculturalists are going in to purchase cold storage for aggregation and distribution, and then you as an individual processor are also going to apply for an equipment only grant. If your agricultural group gets the infrastructure grant, that does not automatically disqualify you from the equipment grant. But no, if you are individually applying for both, you cannot receive funds from both. If you have any questions about this, please give us a call. So everything that I've spoke about until this point are federal sections of the grant. So all 50 states and territories have to adhere to everything that I've talked about so far. From here on out, everything still applies, but these are the specifics to the Oregon RFSI program. So again, we're going to keep the two tracks. So we have the infrastructure projects and the equipment projects. Infrastructure projects are going to have twice yearly reporting, and equipment projects are going to have middle and final reports. That'll make a little bit more sense as we talk about disbursements. The Oregon RFSI program also has an advisory committee of 15 members from a cross section of agriculture, and they represent the industry that is allowed to apply to this program. The advisory committee, I'll speak about it a little bit later, but is critical in reviewing applications. Oregon's program received $5.9 million in funding. 2.8 of that is going to be allocated to infrastructure, 1.2 is allocated to equipment, and $1 million is going to be allocated to a state-led infrastructure project. The remaining dollars are going to be used for the management of the project. Now, we got the split between infrastructure and equipment through a survey that we sent out to the agricultural industry that would be allowed to apply to the program. And based on responses we received, that is the breakdown that was requested. As I mentioned earlier about the matching, you either have, for infrastructure projects, you either are required to match 25% or 50% of your grant request. If you are one of these groups, you automatically qualify for the 25% matching. If you or your business does not identify as one of these prioritized groups, you have to qualify for the 50% matching. So the prioritized applications, essentially what that means is A, you get the lower matching rate, but B, you also get an extra few points on your score sheet. For more information about the score sheet, please visit our website and look at the request for application for the infrastructure or the equipment track, whichever one you're applying for. There will be a score sheet attached to the bottom of the request for application guidance documents. So if you're a small or underserved business owner, if you're a historically underserved farmer or rancher, or another business that qualifies under the small business category of small disadvantaged business, women-owned business, or veteran-owned small business, then you would automatically be a prioritized application. Now, these are self-identifiers, and there's a section of the application that you will select that, and that tells us whether or not you need the 25% or the 50% requirement in match. The Small Business Administration, or SBA, has definitions for what a small business is, what a women-owned business, veteran-owned business, and so on. So please look that up before you select that you are one of those. Additionally, USDA has a definition for underserved farmers and ranchers, as well as small and underserved business owners. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out. The next section is the priorities that we've identified based on the USDA requirements, as well as the industry survey that I mentioned earlier. Now, these priorities are for the infrastructure side. We have a few different priorities for the equipment side, although similar. Some of the infrastructure ones, again, are doing some building of capacity, where, again, the equipment ones are just purchasing equipment. So the priorities for the infrastructure grant are really going to be items that we want your grants to focus on, and areas that your grant at least must focus on one of these items in order to even be allowed to apply to the program. So first and foremost, none of these priorities are going to have any weight, receive any more points than another priority, and we will most likely try to get applications that are across priority level areas. So we're not giving all of the $1 or $2.8 million to one priority, but we are spreading it across priority areas, industry, and crop type. So the first priority area that we identified is we want to coordinate initiatives to build resilience across the supply chain by creating additional new and better markets for local and regionally produced foods. We want to expand capacity of aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, or distribution of products as well. Enhancing worker safety through the adoption of new technologies or investments in equipment and facility improvements is another priority. We're looking at improving the capacity of entities to comply with food safety laws at a federal, state, or local level. We want to increase or improve operations through training opportunities, modernize or expand existing facilities and manufacturing equipment, or supporting the construction of new and modern facilities, construction of wastewater management systems, or develop, customize, and install equipment that reduces greenhouse gas emissions, increases efficiency in water uses, improves air and/or water quality, and meets one or more of the USDA climate action goals. Any of those priority areas, again, are where we're looking at receiving grant opportunities through. But the last one on this list is other goals identified by the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center. Now, the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center is a part of a USDA effort to establish food business centers across the United States that are regional. Each of these regional centers has a budget to allocate to grant opportunities where they're reaching out for or they're providing technical assistance to agriculturalists, providing information, assistance, and there are several goals that they've established and identified for their regions across the state. So if your grant also meets one of the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center goals, and one of the priorities that I mentioned above, you can go ahead and mark that you are meeting one of their goals in the application. Now, you must meet, if you do decide to mark that your application is meeting a goal that the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center has identified, then you must also identify one of the other priority areas that your grant meets. If you are meeting several, then please check several, but you must at least meet one. The priorities for the equipment, again, are going to look very similar, but because we're only purchasing equipment, there are a few things that are going to be a little bit different. So equipment priorities are expanding capacity for aggregation, processing, manufacturing, transporting, wholesaling, storing, and distribution. Enhancing worker safety through adoption of new equipment, improving the capacity of entities to comply with food safety laws, at a state, federal, or local level, modernize or expand existing facilities and manufacturing equipment, develop or customize equipment that reduces greenhouse gas emissions, increases efficiency in water use, improves air or water quality, and meets one or more of the USDA climate action goals. And last, again, if there's a goal identified by the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center, you can select that as well as one of the other priority areas. You will notice within both the priorities for infrastructure as well as equipment, again, really need to be the middle of the supply chain. We can't do on-farm purchases just for the beginning of the supply chain where that farm is selling a crop to someone else to process and they need a new tractor or they need to put in a wastewater management system in the farm. Those would not be allowable activities. However, if a farmer is processing some of their crop on premises and they need an expanded processing line to process more apples or whatever they grow, that would be an allowable activity and expense within the equipment side. If they needed a new processing line and they needed a new building to hold that processing line, that would be an infrastructure grant. But regardless, everything that you apply for does need to be middle of the supply chain and hit one or more of the priorities listed here. The full list of priorities for both grants are going to be in their requests for applications on our webpage. The next section I'm going to talk about is the timeline. Now, the timeline before February 29th, 2024 is going to be a touch different for the infrastructure or the equipment tracks. Everything past that date on the right-hand side in that nice little table is going to be the same for both grant tracks. We are planning on opening the request for applications for the infrastructure grant January 1, 2024, and closing the request for applications February 29th, 2024. Essentially, what this means is that the application will become available for people to start applying January 1st, 2024. Also, the application portal where you will upload your application when it's finished will also open on that date. For the equipment side of things, the application request for application will go live February 1st and close February 29th of 2024. Again, this just means that the application will become available on our website on those dates, and you can start applying between the 1st of February and the 29th of February. Past that, both grants are due February 29th at noon. And we are going to be hosting a set of office hours in early January that are targeted at our regions to essentially spend time answering questions about the grant as well as making connections for regional opportunities. Please make sure that you listen to this process overview and application training prior to visiting one of those office hours, as we will not be doing this presentation in the office hours. Please note that if you are of, let's say, Southern Oregon, but can only attend the Portland Metro office hours, please feel free to do so. We only noted the regionality of those office hours to encourage folks from those areas to attend the same meeting so that we could make connections. But again, if the meeting for your area doesn't meet your schedule, please feel free to join any of the meetings. Office hours are not necessarily a drop-in, but do start at a certain time. Please make sure that you can attend at that time because we'll give a minor presentation at the beginning and then answer questions the rest of the time that's allotted. So once both applications have been received, both tracks, we will start the review process the week of March 8th. I'll go through this in a second in more detail. The advisory committee that I mentioned earlier, that group of 15 industry experts, are going to start review of the applications the week of March 8th. We will come together the week of April 7th to discuss what the advisory committee has scored your applications. The week of April 30th, the director's office will select the subgrantees, which are the applicants, and applicants will receive notification the week of May 1st. We then will go through and submit the applications to USDA by May 24, 2024. Once USDA has received and approved them, we estimate grant work will be able to start August of 2024. All of these dates are subject to change based on USDA or internal situations. So please note that you may not get application notifications directly on May 1st. It may be a little bit later, it may be a little bit earlier. Just depends on schedule. And again, I will go in depth a little bit more about the application process right now. So to start, our application process is essentially a 3-stage application process. Number 1 is you apply. We've received your application. We then, as the program staff, will review the applications for allowability, completeness, and feasibility. So if you're going to turn in an application that's working with an excluded crop, or that the project is something that is completely off the mark and would not be able to be funded by the program, this is where your application would stop. Essentially, we're trying to make it to where the advisory committee does not have to review applications that could not be funded, period. So once your project is approved for allowability, completeness, and feasibility, it will then move on to stage 2, which is the advisory committee review. So advisory committee members will get assigned projects based on their areas of expertise. For example, if somebody turns in a co-packing application, we're going to assign it to our co-pack person. If somebody is turning in a project that is specific to the fruit industry, we're going to assign it to the person who is within the fruit industry. The advisory committee will review all of the grants that they're assigned to and use the score sheets, which are available on the RFAs on our website, to review the applications. They will then send the scores back to our program staff, who put it in a big Excel spreadsheet and average the scores across the entirety of all of the advisory committee members that scored that one grant. That one grant will then receive an average score and is going to be sorted out based on their average score against all other grants. The advisory committee, once that is completed, will come together and have a discussion about the grants, talk about what they liked, what they didn't like, and why they scored it the way they scored it. That discussion is recorded and sent to or transcribed and sent to the ODA leadership within the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Agriculture leadership will use the score sheets, the advisory committee discussion, the allowability, incompleteness, and feasibility comments to then select the grants. They also use some demographic information, basically where the grant is located in the state, what crop it's affecting, what priorities is it hitting, to then dictate whether or not that grant is going to receive funding. From there, once a grant is selected and it moves forward to the Oregon Department of Agriculture state plan, that state plan gets a fine-tooth comb by program staff here at the Department of Agriculture. We're going to look for things like, are all of the boxes checked? Is everything filled out correctly? Are all of the costs allowable? Are there any grammatical errors? Are there things that need to be removed that USDA is not going to like? From there, the applications get sent as a packet, as a whole grant application, state plan to the USDA. USDA will also use a fine-tooth comb, go through all the grants that the Department of Agriculture has sent in, and ask questions about those applications. This is a normal part of the process, and it will come back with questions. We respond to those questions and edit the state plan, and then the USDA will approve it and we will move forward. Again, we are hoping that grants can start August 1st of 2024, but depends on how long the USDA takes to review the grants, get the clarifications back to us, and we go back and forth for that. Once the USDA has approved the grant applications, we will go through what is called the agreement process. And essentially what that process is a contractual agreement between you, the subgrantee, and us, the Department of Agriculture, stating that you are going to do the activities that you have applied to do. You're going to report on time and follow through all of the management and monitoring of your grant. It's fairly straightforward. If you are a recipient of the grant, you will receive training on what is in the agreement, what is in how to receive your disbursements, how to turn in reports, and how to basically manage your grant. So don't worry about that. Now we will get to that at that point. The required documents for both are going to be a touch different. However, the first 3 items are going to be the same. So for infrastructure, you have 2 cover pages that are essentially telling us who you are and what you're applying for. The next section is going to be the application. And then you have attachment A, which is a critical resource and infrastructure letter. I'll explain that in a moment. And attachment B, which is a matching funds verification letter. I'll also explain that. For the equipment side of things, you have cover pages. They're the same cover pages for the infrastructure grant, telling us who you are and what your grant will be for. There's an application, and then attachment A is a critical resource and infrastructure letter. It's the same attachment for both tracks. This is not necessarily a required attachment. However, it may be needed for your grant. It just depends on the equipment that you are requesting. One item that is not listed here for equipment but is also required is a verification of the cost of the equipment that you are trying to receive the grant for. If you have an invoice from a company or a catalog, some sort of quote from someone, then those could be used for verification of the cost of the piece of equipment. I will get to that in a moment when I cover the applications. So, on that note, let's cover the applications themselves. We are going to start by looking at the infrastructure application. Now, as I mentioned, we have what we call the cover pages. Again, these are going to be very straightforward pieces of information about you, your organization, and your grant in general. So you'll go through, this is a fillable PDF. It's a dynamic form. I'll explain what that means in a moment, but go ahead and fill out the name of your organization, your entity type, everything that would be required across the left-hand side here. The one item that folks may not know is this UEI. It stands for Unique Entity Identifier. Essentially, this tells us, as well as the USDA, that you are in good standing with the federal government and that you can receive federal dollars. The UEI is a free item that you can apply for on, I believe it's sam.gov, but the link is available on our website. If you do not have a UEI, you can still apply for the program, but you must have a UEI by the time that we apply to USDA in the state plan if you are selected to move forward. It can be an arduous process, so I recommend starting getting your UEI now. Again, you can still apply without one, but please, if you have started the process, note that in this line that you have started the process and the date you started it for your UEI. If you don't have one, leave it blank and I will ask you to start one as I am reviewing your application. Again, most of this applicant information is fairly straightforward. The primary point of contact is going to be anyone that is going to be the main contact for correspondence and is responsible for signing documentation. So this person is going to be someone who is an authorized representative for your organization. The mailing address does not need to be their personal mailing address, but rather the mailing address of their office location where they normally are at. The next section of this grant is what we call the Distressed Communities Index. Now, this index provides a score for all of the counties across the United States, and territories are not required to submit this data. So if your grant is working in 3 different counties, you would list all 3 counties in their distress score. We then use the distress score as part of your score sheet to add points based on the average of all of the counties you're working in. Please again visit the RFA for the track that you're applying for to see a breakdown of the distress community score and what you would be added based on your distress community score. So what you're going to do here is use the link provided right here, and it will take you to a web page. This is the distressed communities. You go ahead and search state, district, or zip code, or any boundaries that you have here. So we are going to go ahead and just zoom into Oregon here by clicking the state of Oregon. Now, if you know which county you are working in, you can click that county, or you can just hover over it. So, for example, if your grant is working in Jackson County, the Medford area, your distress community score is 15.2. So then you would go back to your application and you would write Jackson and you would say 15.2. Um, as I mentioned earlier, this is a dynamic form. What that means is you're able to add lines by clicking this plus here, or take away lines by clicking the minus sign. So if you totally mess up a county, you can remove it. So let's say you're working in 3 counties, you add it by clicking the plus and you put all 3 counties that you're working with here. Again, you don't need to average them. We will do that internally. But please list the counties that you are directly working in. If your grant is going to impact all 36 counties across Oregon, you have to be directly working in all 36 counties to list them here. If your work is only happening in 1 or 2, you can list 1 or 2 here. But again, they have to be directly being impacted by the work that you are doing to be listed here. The next section is the type of applicant. So whatever the company is you're applying, you click the box over here to denote it. The last section on the cover page is going to be the project title. Anywhere there is a number here, 15 words or less, 250 words or less, please make sure that you adhere to those requests because they're not requests, they're actually requirements. If you turn in an application and it has a 16-word title, we are going to turn it back to you and say, please take a word out of the title. That is because these are USDA requirements and they have to meet certain sideboards for Congress. So the executive summary as well as the title sometimes gets sent to Congress to review federal projects. And if it's over 15 words, it gets cut off and then they don't understand what the project is and funding can be potentially pulled because they don't understand the good that that program is doing because there are some issues. Again, another part of this is if you're not following directions now in the application process, how can we trust that you're going to follow through on reports or disbursement requests? So please make sure that you are being accurate, thorough, and concise in your application. So provide a project title. Next is going to be the duration of your project. As I've mentioned before, we assume that it's going to start October 1st of 2024, and the end date of your project is going to be May 24 of 2027. Now, I understand this is a little under 3 years, but the August start date is again anticipated. We're hoping that we get it a little bit before then. The next section is your executive summary. I forgot to mention the duration of project here is the start of your quote unquote application. The first 2 pages are your cover pages. So the executive summary again is 250 words or less. So there's another numerical value that you need to match. So make sure that it is 250 words or less. I suggest doing your application in a Word document and copying and pasting it over because within the Adobe Pro here, you won't have a word count as easily accessible as you do in Word. With any of these instructions above a section, you are going to see the italicized instructions. Again, please make sure that you answer all sections of the italicized instructions and that you try to adhere to them as best as possible. For example, this one says, provide a project summary that is very brief, one sentence if possible. If you can't get all three of these items within one sentence for your project, that's fine. Please make sure that it's just 250 words or less. The 250 words or less is a must. The one sentence is a would be great, but does not have to be, is not a must. So you'll fill out your executive summary and then you select the project purpose. So this is again the items that we've already spoken about earlier in today's process overview. You go ahead and select which one fits your project. If you are doing a Rocky Mountain or Northwest Rocky Mountain Regional Food Business Center priority, then you in this other category down here, you would type out the priority that you are addressing with your grant from the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center, as well as selecting the other project type that you have. The next section here is a provide the specific issue, problem, or need that the project will address. This is essentially going to be your largest section. This is going to be your who, what, where, when, why. This is really giving you a lot of space to explain what your infrastructure project is going to be, how long it's going to take, why it's needed, what it's doing. Again, who, what, where, when, why is a great thing to look at when you are providing an answer to this question. The next section is going to be objectives that you hope the project is going to achieve. I say anywhere from 3 to 5 should be a good set of objectives, and these objectives are going to be extremely specific to your project. I say a SMART goal is going to be the best way to write these. So make sure that it is specific, that it is measurable, that it is attainable, that it is realistic, and it has a timeline on it. That is what a SMART goal is. So again, these objectives are going to be extremely directed at your project. For example, say my company, Ugalde Fruit Company, it's a made-up company, is going to install a processing line for apples, and we need to also build a facility for it. So we're building the facility and installing the processing line. One of the objectives here might be the purchase of the equipment. We could say something to the effect of uh, Apple processing line will be purchased by January of 2025. The next objective could be something along the lines of Apple processing line will be installed by June of 2025. And then another objective could be that staff will be trained on cleaning and maintenance as well as safety measures of the Apple processing line by October of 2025. Those could be 3 objectives for the grant that I am supposedly applying for. Again, this is all made up. I say again, 3 to 5 objectives are great for a program because you have to report on these. So make sure these are obtainable objectives throughout the life of your grant, rather than just objectives that you're going to reach at the end of your grant. There is another section which we call outcomes and indicators, which I'll talk about in a moment, that are more specified and written out by USDA. They can give you some ideas as to what objectives to put up here, but please do not copy and paste outcomes and indicators into your objectives because you're still going to need to come up with objectives. We will ask you to clarify and change those if you copy and paste them. The next section is going to be the area that denotes whether or not who your project is benefiting. So you're going to estimate the number of project beneficiaries. Now, this is going to be the people that are directly impacted by your grant. These are not the entire state of Oregon. This is not the entire county. This is going to be the people that are directly impacted. So again, if we're using my example of the fruit processing line, if I add this processing line, I'm going to be able to purchase fruit from 10 other growers that weren't previously being able to purchase fruit from. So it's going to directly impact 10 growers. So the estimated project beneficiaries for me would be 10. If the project directly benefits someone that is underserved farmer or rancher, a new and beginning farmer or rancher, a veteran producer, or someone in the middle of the supply chain that is owned by a socially disadvantaged individual, go ahead and click those boxes. This just tells us who is getting the benefits. The next section here before we get into page 5 is other support from federal or state grant programs. If you have another federal grant, it cannot be brought as match for this federal grant. However, if you have a state grant, you can bring it as match. So if you have a state grant, please explain that here. If you have a federal grant, please explain that here. We may ask to see that other grant that you have received to ensure that you're not being duplicative. Essentially, what that means is if you've already got a state grant to purchase the piece of equipment and you're also asking RFSI for the same amount of money to purchase the same piece of equipment, we may not allow you to purchase that equipment through our grant, but say you've already got a grant, use that money to buy the equipment and this grant to maybe install it. The next section is external project support. So this area is where you're going to list stakeholders that are outside of your organization and outside of the project partners. So project partners are people that are actively working on the grant with you. External project supporters are people that are outside of that want your project to happen, think it's a great project to happen, but maybe are not actively working on it with you. So for example, keeping with my example that we're going with here, say the Oregon Farm Bureau thinks that me adding a processing line that I can purchase from 10 other growers is going to be beneficial for my area. I could list them as someone who is in support of my project and give a short paragraph as to why they support my project. Please make sure that you give a why to anyone that you add in this list, and you don't just give us a list of 600 people with no context as to why they support your project. As I mentioned above, we have the expected performance measures, or what we call outcomes and indicators. Again, these are a little bit different than your objectives, but you will still have to report on both your objectives and your outcomes and indicators. These are items that USDA has identified through a large study that they did with Purdue University and their grant programs to determine what expected outcomes and indicators actually provide data and good data for USDA to use to show the effectiveness of their grant programs. So as you can see, you cannot change any of the wording of any of the descriptions, but you can just add expected numbers. I would say anywhere from 3 to 7 expected outcomes and indicators would be a good set. Just depends on how large your program is, anywhere from $100,000 to $2 million. So for example, we're talking about my imaginary fruit processing line. As I said, I would need to construct a new facility. So I would say I'm putting in one facility, so I could write in outcome 2, indicator 2.1, that I am constructing one new facility, so I get to put a 1 there. I'm not going to expand an existing facility, so I don't need to put anything there, but I am going to purchase the new apple processing line, so I can put that there. You can go through, if you are not going to use an outcome or indicator, like we noted, we're not going to use 2.2 because we're not going to mess with an existing facility. You can go ahead and click in A here that it does not apply to your grant. You do not need to click them. If you leave the area blank, that's fine. But just make sure that if you do leave the area blank and you don't click it, that we will click this for you and you won't end up being able to report on that grant outcome and indicator. So you'll go through outcome 2 and outcome 3 here and review them and see which ones best fit your grant. The next section here, and probably the longest overall section, is going to be your budget narrative. So the first section is the matching funds. And this is what I said earlier about the difference between 50 and 25% matching funds. You will self-identify as one of these areas that you are either a beginning farmer and rancher, a veteran farmer and rancher, a limited resource farmer and rancher, a socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher, a small disadvantaged business, or a women-owned small business, or a historically underserved farmer or rancher. If you are one of these areas, please check that area and then check the box that you certify that your entity qualifies for the 25% match. Because essentially, if you come back and it comes to light that you are not one of these groups and you selected it and only provided a 25% match, you may be automatically disqualified for the program because you only provided 25% when you needed to provide 50% because you are not one of these groups. If you think you're in one of these groups but don't quite know, please feel free to reach out and ask. We will give you as much information and help as we can. USDA has a definition for all of these areas, so please feel free to reach out and we will provide that to you so you can meet and understand the definition. The next section here is the budget summary. One thing to note is please make sure that your total in these columns, fund requested or match type, match the total that are in the breakdown sections below. If your expenses don't match in this table to the expenses listed below, we're going to have to ask you to edit them. One thing that you need to understand is if you don't do your math correctly and you only ask for 1 million, but the math comes out that your project actually needs 1.5 million, there may not be another $500,000 to give you to complete the project. You may have to figure out how to do your project with the lower number. So please make sure that you go through and double check your math. It's always great to have somebody else come and check your math as well. Just having another set of eyes can be extremely helpful. So after you've gone through and filled out these individual sections of personnel, fringe, any of these expense categories below, which I'll explain in a second, you'll come back up here and you will enter the total funds that you're requesting. For example, we could be requesting $50,000 in personnel. We're requesting $50,000, but our match is going to be maybe $20,000 provided by our organization. Then you go over to the match type and you select whether or not it's cash or in kind. There's a definition of what cash and what in kind is in the RFAs on our website for both tracks, so feel free to read up on that if you need more information. So again, we are not going to subtract $20,000 from the $50,000 of the funds requested. So make sure that you understand that the total value of the personnel or whatever category that you're working with here across the entirety of the row, so the 50,000 and the 20,000 would equal $70,000 in personnel for your grant. Again, this is additive, not negative. So make sure that you are not messing that up when you are putting it together. So for example, this personnel is our first breakdown into individual items. You're going to go through and list the personnel that you are going to have on your grant and their title. Please make sure that when you are filling out this document that you fill out every single square for every single line item that you are putting in. If you go in and write, let's say, Gabrielle, she is the owner of this fake establishment that I've thought of, and I leave this level of effort blank, but I still say she's going to have $50,000 from the grant and match $20,000 of in-kind work. We don't know what level of effort or what hours are being used. So this could be, Gabrielle could be charging the grant 1 hour of work and getting $50,000 for it. Well, that doesn't make any sense. So we want to make sure that your project is reasonable and feasible. And in order to do that, we need to have all of the information that is requested across all of the breakdowns of all of the sections of the budget. So please make sure that you do that. Underneath every section except fringe, there's going to be a location for a justification. Essentially, what the justification is a breakdown of the items above and why you need them. Please make sure to fill out all of the information that is requested in the italicized section above. So for example, this one needs to describe the activities that are going to be completed by the person that is listed above, the name of the person listed above, and the title, plus when the activities will occur. For example, if we're going to say Gabrielle here, the owner, myself in this fictional situation, is going to be personnel 1, in the justification section, we're going to write down that Gabrielle is going to put in 100 hours of work throughout the life of the grant, doing all monitoring activities, writing all of the reports, following through with all of the disbursement requests, and so on. You write that down here. Again, this form is dynamic, so if you need to add more personnel, you just click the pause plus sign here, or if you need to take away a line, you just click the minus sign. Again, this form will auto sum for you. So let's say we add another person and they're doing $30,000 worth of work, the personnel subtotal will get auto summed. Please make sure that when you fill these out that you use the subtotal that is here in the budget summary above. So as you can see, this says $80,000 because we added a random other person, but your budget summary only says $50,000. We are going to approve what's in the budget summary rather than what's in the breakdown because we expect you to go through and do the math. So again, if your project is realistically 1.5 million and you only list 1 million in your budget summary, you may not be able to get the extra $500,000 to finish your project. The next section is fringe benefits. This is the only section, as I mentioned, that does not have justification because it does not need it. We understand what fringe benefits are. After that, we fall into travel. Now, most of your grants probably aren't going to require any travel, but if they do, please note that we don't want an entire trip on one line. We want individual expenses for the trip on individual lines. For example, if I need to travel to Bend to collect the machine, we are going to charge for mileage. We're going to be gone 2 days and it's going to be $100. I don't know. Again, these are, sorry, it's 100 miles and it's going to be 0.56 per mile. There's only one person claiming the expense and you guys can go through and do the math. We are going to add another line here, and for the Bend, Oregon trip, we're also going to do a hotel for one night, and we only need one hotel room. It's going to be $150, and there's only one person claiming the expense. So our expense there is $150. So please note that you must use the GSA rate if you are going to be doing any traveling. Now, the government standard rate here, so GSA, is this link that you can click. It will take you to another web page, which you can scroll down and you can look up per diem, you can look up flights, you can look up hotel rates. The best way to do this is going to the travel. plan and book, and then you can look over transportation rates or airfare or whatever you need. So we can look at per diem. This is a great place to start. So example, we're going to Bend, we're in Oregon, and we can click find rates. So then you can see in Bend in January of 2024, it's $126 a night for daily lodging rates. If in your application you say, we're going to Bend, Oregon, and we have $150 for a hotel, but the GSA rate is only $126, we may ask you to reduce the cost of your hotel to $126 based on the GSA rate. You cannot be more than that because this is what is allowed within the government dollars. Again, I don't expect many of you will have travel costs. What we do not want to see is we don't want to see a line that says Bend, Oregon trip and number of days to and 100 and then some random number of 300 here. We don't understand that this is your mileage and hotel put together in one line item. We really truly need to see them listed out as mileage and hotel because of the GSA rate. So we need to go through and make sure that you are adhering to the federal guidelines within this. Under travel justification, if you are only taking like trip number 1 to Bend, you can list all of the items for trip 1 in one trip justification. Please make sure that you give justification for your trips and fill out all of the requested information, including approximate dates of travel. Because again, as we saw on the GSA website, June, July in Bend is $191 a night versus January in Bend's $126. So the estimated dates of travel will give us a better idea for items like hotel. This next section is just confirming that you are going to follow your company's travel policies by clicking the box here. Again, pretty straightforward there. Next section is going to be equipment. So this is going to be your special purpose equipment. This is tangible, non-expendable personal property that has a useful life of more than 1 year and is a cost that exceeds $5,000. So, for example, the processing line that I talked about earlier in this fake example would go here. Rental of general purpose equipment will also be described in this section. So if you need to rent a tractor to move some land to be able to put in the facility to then hold the processing line and you're renting that, that can go here. But the purpose of the purchase of general purpose equipment is not allowed. So you can't go out and buy just a tractor to move some land and then keep it. You would have to rent that item. So then go ahead and fill this all out and give us a description and justification of the item that you're purchasing and why you need to purchase it. The next section is going to be supplies. So these are any items that are under $5,000 and that are tangible items. So things like permits or architectural plans, those types of things go into a different cost category. The supplies, again, are tangible items. So, for example, if you need flanges to go on the processing line to ensure that you can process apples, and those flanges are under $5,000 a unit, they would go here. If you needed to purchase bolts to put the processing line together, those types of things would go here. So materials, supplies, and fabricated parts costing less than $5,000 per unit. Again, there's a justification section, so please go through and fill that out. The next section is construction. So if you are constructing a building or a processing line or something within your infrastructure grant, anything that includes administrative, legal expenses, structures, relocation expenses, architectural engineering fees, project inspection fees, site work, demolition, removal, construction, and other miscellaneous expenses that are attributed to construction would go in here. So please make sure that you list those and a justification for each of those items. So if you have to have a permit to remove an old building, you would put the permit here, but then also provide a justification as to why you are required to have that permit. The next section is going to be contractual or consultants, and these are going to be people that are going to provide a service to you that are potentially maybe the architectural firm that is drawing up the architectural plans. They're going to require additional time or staff time. That contractor would go here. If you are having a contractor come out and build the building, the time and effort would go here. Supplies would go up in the contractor section. Then please provide a description and justification of what the contractor is doing and the consultant services will be doing. Please make sure to include a timeline, and if the contractor is hourly or flat rate, again, that's making sure that you fill all of the items above in the budget breakdown section and don't leave any boxes left open. Just like in travel, you need to confirm that you are going to follow your company's procurement standards when you are getting contractors or consultants. The last section here for budget is other. These are expenses that aren't included in any other budget category. So meetings and conferences or communications, rental expenses, advertisements, and so on would go here. So for example, if we get this new processing line, we put it in, and we need to train our staff on how to properly clean it, and we need to bring in someone, or we need to purchase a computer program that trains our staff on how to clean it. You would put the purchase of the computer program here. If you would need to buy a workshop for your staff to go to learn how to maintain the new processing line, that would go here as well. So again, there's a justification section. The last item on the application as a whole is going to be indirect costs. If you have a NICRA, a negotiated indirect cost rate, you can use that within this program. You just have to provide us a copy of your NICRA. If you don't have a negotiated indirect cost rate, you can use the de minimis rate of 10% based on all of your direct charges. So everything that I've talked about up until this point is what we consider a direct charge. You can only request indirect money on the direct charges to your grant. You cannot request indirect funds on your matching. However, indirect funds can be matching, but they can only be up to 10% of the allowable direct costs within your grant. So please go ahead and fill this out. If you need assistance with this, let us know. And that is the application for infrastructure. There are two attachments that you must include for infrastructure. The first one is attachment A, evidence of critical resources or infrastructure. Essentially, this attachment says we already have the building, we already have the land, we already have all of the critical resources in order to start the project where we are requesting funds from and to move the project forward. So you're going to provide the applicant organization, name of the applicant authorized representative, the project title, and organization address. And for example, if in this fictional situation, me as the owner of Ugaldi Fruit is renting the land from John Doe that my processing line is going to go on, I would need John Doe to sign this document and fill it out saying that essentially I have permission to, or they approve that they're going to continue renting the land to me through the duration of the grant. So John Doe would write, "Dear Ugalde Fruit Company, we are committed, approve, and or grant permission to use parcel of land 1 point whatever at address 123 wherever Oregon for the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant project titled," whatever the project title is, "for the time period of," you can say period of performance, or you can write the time period that you would be allowing them to be using the item. And then you describe in the following way. So then in this box, you describe the approved use of the critical resource or infrastructure approved for the project and any costs associated with its use. So then John Doe would say something to the effect of, the Ugalde Fruit Company is allowed to build a new building and install a processing line on our lot 100 um, for the extent of the grant period with the rental agreement of $1,000 a month, whatever the critical resource is or the infrastructure is. From there, John Doe will certify that the critical resources already in place, started up, and implementation and completion of the proposed activities can happen. So essentially, you have to already have a critical resource in place before you can apply. So if you don't have the land rented to build the building to put the processing line in, you can't apply for the grant. You have to have matching funds, and you have to have critical resources or infrastructure already in place in order to move forward. Next, John Doe would sign this, and you need this attachment A for every single critical resource or infrastructure that's already in place that's going to be imperative that is there when you're working on your grant. We may also ask for a critical resource or infrastructure attachment A after you've applied to the grant to make sure that something is in place that is required. That's not a big deal, but we do need this item no matter what when you are applying for an infrastructure grant. Attachment B is a match verification letter. A match verification letter is required for every source of matching funds that you're going to put towards your grant. Very similarly to attachment A, this attachment B, the matching funds, you'll fill out the organization providing the match, the address providing of the organization that provides the match, organization name applying for the grant, and organization address applying for the grant. If you are using in-kind matching from your organization and you're the organization applying for the grant, please still fill out this full section. Next, it says, "Dear Oregon Department of Agriculture, we, the organization providing the match funds, is committed to provide the following matching funds to the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant Project application by the organization applying for the grant." Number 1 here is cash match. Number 2 is in-kind match. So whatever organization is providing matching funds will say they're providing $10,000 in matching funds, which in cash, which they will provide during the period of August through January, August of 24 through January of 27, and you will list what the funds will be used for. We will say it's personnel time. And that is enough information to give us to look at the application to find it. But if you are going to give cash match for, let's say, the processing line, you need to be more specific about what you're actually giving the cash for. So let's say we're giving the cash for permits for installation of processing line. And this would be enough information for us. If you have more, please provide it though. If you're going to provide everything in a lump sum year one, you can put the whole total in year one. But if the organization is going to give you, let's say, $5,000 year one and $5,000 year two, you can leave year three blank there. But please make sure that you fill this out. For in-kind contributions, you will total the in-kind contributions here, and you will break them out based on the salaries and wages or based on the item that you're purchasing. So, for example, let's say we're doing $7,000 of in-kind contributions. We would say that Gabrielle is providing some time, management, management. I cannot spell, I apologize. And then the base rate and how many hours are going to be allocated year one, two, or three. And next, if you are giving items rather than personnel time, you would put in-kind items down here, their fair market value and amount that's been donated each year. If you need more lines for either personnel or for items, please let me know. I can edit this document and send it back to you. Unfortunately, this is not a dynamic form like the USDA applications. However, we are hoping to get to that level soon. Next, whatever organization is providing the matching funds will sign it and give it back to the applicant applying. Now, attachment A and attachment B, as well as your infrastructure grant cover page and proposal, need to all be turned in at the same time. I will discuss how to turn those in 1 second. I do want to go over the equipment only grant first application. So just like the infrastructure side of things, the first 2 pages are your cover page. So again, it's going to be applicant information. You also need a UEI for the equipment program. If you don't have a UEI when you apply, you must already be starting getting your UEI, and then let us know that you've started it. You need to have a UEI or a unique entity identifier by the time your organization receives the grant. So please make sure that you work on getting that prior to applying. It's a fairly straightforward process. Again, the rest of this information is going to be about the point of contact and the company in general. For the equipment section, you still use the Distress Communities Index. Please go ahead and use this link. Find the counties that your project directly works in and list them below. If you only work in one county, list one county. If you work in 6 counties, list 6 counties. But please make sure that you are only listing counties that you are directly impacting with this grant and can pretty much verify that you're working in those counties. Please don't list all 36 counties in Oregon. That's not going to help you. In the score sheet for the equipment side of the tracks, you can look at what the Distress Community Index score will be used for and how many extra points you will be awarded for the average that you will be working in. You'll list the type of applicant that you are by clicking the box to the left, and you'll give us the project title. As with the infrastructure grant, if there are any 15 words or less, or as you see here, 250 words or less, please make sure that you adhere to that, because the USDA uses the project summaries and titles to report to Congress to display how the programs are doing. If you write 16 words or if you write 251 words, we're going to ask you to remove 1 word. So please make sure that you correctly follow the instructions. It also demonstrates to the Department of Agriculture that you are a low-risk applicant, which is a good thing, because you can follow instructions. So it puts us at ease for reporting and other management items. After the project title, you'll work at the executive summary. Now, the executive summary is a project summary, 250 words or less, that provides a very brief description of the project, but still hits these 3 items. If you can provide it in 1 sentence or less, that would be great. Well, 1 sentence is, if possible. There's not really less than 1 sentence. Next section is you're going to do the project purpose, so processing, aggregation, distribution, or value add. Please click where you are in the middle of the supply chain. You'll list the type of food products that are processed with the equipment that you want to purchase. So if we're sticking with my processing line, fictional processing line, we would go ahead and list apples here. And we would just say that's the one processing line that I'm going to purchase. Apples is what the product type I'm messing with. Let's say whole apples. The next section is going to be the scope of work. It's truly describing why you need the piece of equipment and what you're going to do with it. So please go through and describe current business operations, including services being offered in the geographic area that you are in. The next section is going to be the specific need the requested equipment will address. And after that, we're going to talk about the impact the equipment will have on local and regional producers. So please make sure that these three areas are filled out clearly, concisely, but also thoroughly. These should be the three largest areas of your equipment only application. After that, you're going to estimate the number of local and regional producers impacted. As we talked about earlier in this fictional situation, adding a processing line means that I can buy from 10 more farmers. So that's how many producers would be impacted if we got this grant. Next, we ask if the project is directly benefiting any underserved farmers, new and beginning, veteran producers, or middle of the supply chain businesses owned by socially disadvantaged people, and you check the box that matches that individual or individuals or groups that you will be directly impacting and benefiting from the added, let's say, processing line. For the equipment grants, there is a much shorter section of performance measures because, again, not all of the performance measures that work for infrastructure also work for equipment. So you will go through and read each of the indicators for the outcomes here and decide which ones fit your project. So fictional processing line, we're going to say the number of processing units purchased and installed is 1. And that's all we're going to do because the processing line isn't going to aggregate, store, or distribute. And then we can list down here number of local or regional agricultural producers who benefited from the new and improved processing line would be 10. And that's it. You can leave it that simple for outcomes and indicators because, again, this is a simplified equipment only grant. It's not as big as the infrastructure grant. The last item that you need for the equipment is the budget narrative. It is literally only the equipment section of the budget narrative on the infrastructure side. So you would go through and say Apple processing line, and let's say it's going to be $20,000. I'm going to buy it. Nope, that's the wrong date. I'm going to buy it in December of 2024, and the funds requested are 200,000. Is that the right number there? Yep, 200,000. So we can see that the purchase price and the funds requested are the same. These don't have to match. For example, if the purchase price is, the funds requested would not be 200,000. It would be 100,000. I apologize. Let's say the purchase price is 200,000, but we're only requesting $100,000. Please make sure above in your section of the services being offered or in the specific need, how you're going to provide the additional $100,000 to purchase the equipment. This next section is going to be the justification for your equipment. So why you need the Apple processing line and what you're going to do with it, where it's going to live, etc. As I mentioned earlier, applicants must submit documentation to substantiate the cost of each piece of equipment, including contracts, catalog pricing, bidding quotes, etc. So if I have an apple processing line, I can reach out to the person or multiple companies that build apple processing lines and say, please give me a quote for this type of machine for this amount of capacity, and provide a substantiated cost for that piece of equipment by um, adding to my application their quotes. So please make sure that you provide that when you are providing the application. That is the equipment only proposal. It is 5 pages. It is short and sweet. You will need critical resource attachment A if you are doing equipment and you have a critical resource that needs to already be established. For example, if we're sticking with the processing line here, if I don't already have a building in place to put the processing line, there's no point in me having a processing line just out in the middle of a field. So please make sure that you fill out the attachment A for any critical resources or infrastructure. So again, the applicant organization, name of the authorized representative for the applicant organization, the project title, and the applicant organization address. So let's say Sally Sue is renting my company, Ugaldi Fruit, a building to put the apple processing line in. Sally Sue would write, "Dear Ugaldi Produce, we are committed to approve or grant permission to use building Z at 123 Wherever Road in Wherever, Oregon, for the installation of apple processing line for the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant project titled." This is where you put the project title. "For the time period of," and you list the project period of performance or however long you will have the infrastructure or critical resource, and in the following ways. So in this section, you are going to describe the approved use of the critical resource or infrastructure for the project. So for example, Sally Sue could write that she approves the building to be used for the installation of the apple processing line. Rent for the building is going to be $1,000 a month, and we may ask you to provide a rental agreement or some sort of documentation that the critical resource is currently implemented. So then Sally Sue would check the box that the critical resource or infrastructure are already in place and usable for the start of the grant program. Then Sally Sue would print, sign, and date, and list the organization. Again, attachment A is needed for both the infrastructure and the equipment grant. Now, once you have all of your documents filled out, saved, and ready to go, you are going to go to the Oregon Department of Agriculture's RFSI website. You should already be fairly familiar with this web page, being that this is where everything will live. So you can get your applications from here. This is where the request for applications is going to go live. If you Google Oregon Department of Agriculture RFSI, this should be the page that you get. Off to the right here is going to be my contact information, as well as the Resilient Food Systems email. You can see right here, multiple team members have access to this, so feel free to email that at any time. The main body of this is going to be essentially what I've talked about today. So it talks about the project types being infrastructure here and equipment below. It talks about the eligible products and what is ineligible, what eligible organizations are, and some exclusions. The next section is going to be the timeline, and these again are subject to change. So this first section is all of the outreach that we are doing. The next section is infrastructure grant. And if you remember from earlier in the presentation, the infrastructure and equipment grants are a little bit different in their open request for proposal or request for applications, because the infrastructure grant, as you can tell, is a much larger application. We want folks to have a little bit more time with it. So infrastructure grants open January 1 and close February 29th. Equipment grants open February 1 and close February 29th. From there, the remaining pieces here of the timeline are for both tracks. What you'll want to pay the most attention to is this bottom section of our web page, what we call the resources. It has things like the Resilient Food Systems webpage for USDA, or the Regional Food Business Center webpage. So this is where you can find the Northwest Rocky Mountain Regional Food Business Center priorities. So feel free to join that. The ODA has put together a food and beverage roadmap. This can be used to maybe connect with other people in your area or find processors and producers around you. We have an Oregon Small Business Development Center. They can potentially help you with the application itself. We can help you better understand the sections and give you technical assistance, but we will not be able to help you actually write the grant. So please feel free to reach out to the Small Business Development Center or other grant writing resources to get assistance. The next section is our program guidelines in 3 different languages, and below that will be our applications. As I mentioned earlier, applications will not be posted until the requests for applications go live. Your 2 attachments will also be posted here, the critical resource and the match verification. Additionally posted here will be a couple of other things that will be a resource for you. So the link that will go to the unique entity identifier, the UEI, will be here. A link to upload the application will be here, which I'll talk about in a second, and a few other useful information links will be here as well. The link to this webinar will be either in the timeline of events, in the resource section, or just in the main body, probably in all 3. Additionally, in this main body section will be a link to apply to your program. It will end up looking like this. Most of the time it will log you directly in. You won't actually have to log in, but if you do have to log in, the login for the RFSI application is RFSI grant. You do not need a password. You can just click login. Hopefully the link that you click on our webpage will take you to this webpage. This is what our file upload, or where you will turn in your application, is going to look like. To start, you will choose the files by selecting, or you can drag and drop files into this box. And the box is anywhere inside this light blue square or where it is white. I suggest choosing the files by selecting. It's a lot easier to get whatever files you need. You can only select up to 7 files for upload when you upload documents. So if you end up having 7 match letters, verification letters, 3 critical resource letters, and the application and cover page, that's going to be a number of documents. Feel free to upload twice. That's absolutely okay. So when you do select a file for upload, it will show up right here. It will give you the file name of the document. Please make sure that you fill out the file, or you save the file as the required naming convention, which is in the request for application. So please make sure that you do that. Below, you're going to fill out the name. You're going to fill out your email address and your phone number. You cannot upload a document without all 3 of these pieces of information. Okay. Next is going to be a brief explanation of what you are sending the Department of Agriculture. This could be RFSI grant application. Please make sure you indicate whether it's infrastructure or equipment. Finally, once you have all of the files selected that you want to upload, your name, email, and phone are listed, you can click the Begin Upload link. You should see a little box that pops up that says complete, the number of files that you have successfully sent. If you need to continue to upload more files, for example, if you have more than 7, you can hit this little return button. It will go back to the file upload section for you. If you do not get the complete notice, if you get something that's an error message, please try again and then contact us and let us know that there is an issue. This file system will get a little cranky if everyone is trying to upload at the same time. So I suggest possibly uploading the day before applications are due, just to avoid the rush of everyone applying last minute. If by some reason this whole system goes down the date that everything is due, we will accept applications via email. However, applications are not to be sent to us via email first. Please, please, please upload. It is a requirement that you upload your application. If you send it to us via email and do not upload, we will not accept your application. If you don't turn in your application in the correct format, if you don't have all of your parts, if half of your application is missing, and you turn it in hopes of getting an extension or in hopes of having time to edit it, you will not. Please make sure that you turn in full, complete, and readable and understandable applications. So once you've turned in an application, you are done and you are good to go. Please again visit our website for more information and for the office hour links of when we are going to be hosting office hour outreach sessions. Thank you all for your time today. We really appreciate your interest in the RFSI Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant. Please make sure to reach out to the Resilient System Grant at oda.oregon.gov if you have any questions or would like to be on our listserv. Our listserv is where we are going to be sending out all of the RFIs, so the requests for applications, as well as any news or press releases regarding the program. Additionally, we will be posting those things on our social media pages for the Department of Agriculture and a few other areas. But please think about signing up for the listserv because it's an easy way to get you the most accurate and up-to-date information possible. Again, please feel free to reach out to us at this email. We appreciate your time and attention today, and thank you for your interest in the program. Have a great afternoon.